Hello, lovely. It's Carolina Marie here, and I'm your host of Free and on Fire, empowering you to be free, unleashed, and limitless. And welcome to the 20th and final episode of Free and on Fire Season 1. I can't believe that it's already been a year. This journey started last December when a mentor and guide kind of spoke to me and telling me to think about television as an option for what it is that I'm up to in the world. And I thought he was crazy. But as I let the idea sink in, and as I was talking to my other friend, Lucero, I was like, maybe we should think about creating a YouTube channel and just see what happens. Little did I know, less than a few weeks later, I would have gotten a grant to be invited as a broadcaster on an independent Christian television network. And that a year later, this show would have expanded to 17 different platforms. And that I would have met 19 incredible women who have had the courage to come on the show and share their story. I want this episode to just be a reflection of what has gotten accomplished through the courage of each of these women coming on the show to share their story. And just as I created the show, the intention was that we cover uncommon faith-based topics with everyday women who are walking out their faith and their journey with Christ and sharing the story of their healing from the shame that they've dealt with, because it comes in all shapes, sizes, and colors. And so I first just want to really get everyone present, including myself, to everything we covered. We've covered the topics of sexual assault, abortion, eating disorders, alcoholism, infidelity, singleness, marriage, body image, questioning our faith, unplanned pregnancy, social justice, race, and faith, shame around sex, how presentation and fashion and styling play a role in our faith and our godly confidence, and how we can even use that as a way to hide ourselves and when we feel shame and not good about who we are. I reflected on everything that we have covered, and I thought the show was more going to be about each of these women's journey and how God has been with them on that journey to free them from the shame that they've experienced in their own life. And what got revealed to me was that just as important in sharing that is their actual journey with God. You see, that is just as important to share, because it is as varied and diverse as each of us are. It reveals the creativity of our Creator, and that He will use anything, all things, to get to us, and that He meets us and can speak to us in any way, through anything, through anyone. And there is nothing and no lengths that He won't go to get to us and to have us turn back to Him. The other beautiful thing that God revealed to me through all of this is that, we were all once the lost sheep, the 1 in 99 that He went to go look for, right? And it is in our story that God can then use us as a vessel, and use us as a vessel to then go and find other lost sheep for Him. And we can find those lost sheep because we were that lost sheep. We're able to talk to them in a way that they can relate to. We know what they're thinking. We know what they're feeling. And we can go and be there for them and go meet them where they're at, just as Jesus met everyone where they were at. I just encourage us to really get that is who we're meant to be. We're meant to be Christ in other people's lives. The second thing that really came to me, and this is just like so incredible for me, I was in Genesis, and this is where God had really revealed, and Spirit had revealed to me in the very beginning, like shame has been a core negative emotion that's just been there from the very beginning. It's the very first emotion that Adam and Eve felt, and it then had them hide from God. This is what really got me. Spirit led me back to this scripture. And what I saw was, despite knowing, God is all knowing. He knew that they disobeyed. He knew that they missed the mark. He knew that they sinned. And yet he still called for them. And the root word of that word called, he called in Genesis 3:9, it said, the Lord called to them. That word called in Hebrew means to call to oneself, like an invitation. And it just goes to show the true, beautiful, loving character of God. He could have killed them right then and there. It's like, you disobeyed, you're done. But he didn't. And even despite the fact that they sinned and he knew that they were hiding from him, he still called for them. And then not only that, he still went looking for them, knowing that they had now felt like they were no longer worthy of the presence of God. He still called after them, saying, like, where are you? You're supposed to be here with me. But you have now done this and feel now that you are no longer worthy of my presence. But I'm still going to call after you and still find you. And I don't think that this is something that should be overlooked, because this is exactly what shame does to us. It has us feel like we are not worthy. It has us feel like we need to hide from God. We need to numb it out. We don't want to deal with it. We don't want to deal with it for ourselves, because there's probably stories we've made up about ourselves inside of what we've done or should have done or didn't do, or what people have done to us. And it is just so incredibly vital that we rise up as a society to use empathy and vulnerability to cast out the shame. I just wanted to share that revelation, because it just really got me in seeing how his love and his character was there from the very beginning. The other thing that I got from that scripture was that their sin overshadowed the truth that God's love never left them. It's like, and isn't this the truth for all of us? You know, God's love we can never be separated from the love of God. Nothing could ever separate us from the truth that we are loved and whole and complete. Yet the errors and the sin and missing the mark of what God has intended for us, and when we do that, it's like it blinds us. We allow it to put us in darkness, and then it completely puts a veil, if you will, over our eyes and keeps us in the dark. When if we were to actually just bring it out and bring it to the light, we'd actually see that God's love never left us. The third incredibly beautiful thing that I found is that in each of our stories that have been shared here, and this is so true of every other story in the Bible, when you have an encounter with Jesus, you do not walk away the same. And your life, your path changes direction, your life then alters, but you also alter. And so if you haven't experienced that, if you haven't experienced this like trajectory and change in path for yourself, or you still see yourself acting in ways that you or being the way that you view yourself, or maybe the way that you view other people, or the way that, you know, something that you're dealing with, is to ask yourself the question if you've really fully surrendered it to him. And if you don't, or if you lack the faith, tell him that. He wants to know. He's not surprised. But he does want your whole heart. And it is first the work that he needs to do and start in us, so then he can then work through us and be the light through us. And the last major piece and thread that I saw throughout all of the interviews was on the subject of identity and our true identity in Christ. Time and again, every woman had shared that their own lesson and what they needed to get was who they really are and who it is that God says they are. And one of the guests, Rebecca, said it so perfectly, because this is what she does with women. She works with women to get the truth of who they are in God from their head to their heart. And this is why an everyday, daily practice of surrender is important. Having ourselves be transformed into the image of Christ is what we've signed up for when we said that we're going to be his followers. It means that we were going to be traveling somewhere, being a follower, and that means leaving the place that we are at so that he can take us to where he wants to go. And that means we ought to expect that we will not be the same person as we started on the journey to where it is that he wants to take us. And there's a lot of things and so much, can you imagine, that we need to undo to actually get the reality of who we are. Chosen, holy, which is blameless, royalty, precious. These are not things that we wake up and just feeling like there's a truth about us. It doesn't matter how many times we hear it, if it is not the truth in your heart, it's not going to make a difference. It's important for us to hold fast to our faith, and as Philippians 1:6 says, he who began the good work in us, will bring it to completion. Isn't it so comforting to know that not only do we have a God who can relate to us as well, who can sit with us as we fall and say, it's okay, it's time to get back up, but that we can meet other people in our life who have been on the journey too. And this is what makes community so incredibly powerful. So in all of these things that have been revealed through each of these interviews, I really wanted to kind of cap this off with the words of wisdom and the exercises and practices and just the overall general advice that these women have given throughout their journey of undoing, their journey of drawing closer to Christ and what that's looked like, what's helped them grow in intimacy and relationship with God. And so I just wanted to really share some of these clips with you because they have just been so incredibly powerful for me over the past year. And I just want to reshare them with you.
God is a gentleman, and it's kind of like he won't allow you to move. It's like you can't move on. So at some point you're going to have to confront what you're going through and what you went through in order for you to move forward. Especially if you want to, I think that once you, even if you were Catholic or you just accepted God, we grew up in the church, like once that seed is planted, it's going to come back, and God's going to meet you there when you need him most. And so when you're seeking out your future, when you're wanting to be freed, even if you don't have the strength to, like, you're gonna have to confront that. And I think it's so it's just so great how God even sets that moment up, because if you, in order for you to move forward and have the future that God has for you, like, you're going to have to come to that moment of like, God, I need you and I surrender all of this that I'm feeling. And it's, in my mind, it's just like a lot of people have that moment.
In the very simplest form, when I'm not honoring who I know myself to be in God, which I don't even know the fullness of who she is, but I'm on my way, right? But when I am I am out to honor myself and who I am in God. And when my actions do not align with who that woman is, something is off.
If I can, as a personal trainer, really work with people to bring them into that place of freedom where it's one less thing that they're fighting over in their lives, that's going to open them up to do all this other stuff wants them to do. You know, I was thinking this past weekend, I mean, the devil, he wants us hating our body because it benefits him for us to hate that which is made in God's image. He has us discouraged and distracted and deceived into thinking that our body is the enemy or food is the enemy.
Now is comfortable, but it's kind of like sitting on a nail. It's a little uncomfortable.
Yep.
And you're like, but not uncomfortable enough where you're like, you're gonna
move.
get up.
Yep.
Don't wait for the thing to stab you in the tush.
Yep.
Like, you need to, like, respond now, and just take that leap of faith. And when you take a step towards God, he will show up. He shows up.
Yeah. Every single time. Like you said, take that leap, and sometimes it's not going to make sense to everyone else, and that's actually the thing that you know when it is God, because it isn't going to make sense, and he wants you to come to him for clarity, not other people. So that's absolutely.
And it was, this time my walk is mine. It's not because I'm part of a church or because I'm part of a group or because this is coming from my family background or my cultural background.
Yes.
And yes, comments still kind of shake me sometimes, but I have to remember, and I hold on to a couple of these verses, that I have to remember whose I am, which is God, and that really if their name isn't God, their opinion doesn't matter at the end of the day, and that I have to be good with me.
Like I said, when I first had my daughter, this was a practice that he had given to me, and I still do it to this day. I still need it. It anchors my heart like nothing else, but just reading through the Bible and listing out his character. Write it down. Every day I sit down and I have to write out who he is. And from there, I can then begin to identify how he sees me, what my identity is, and what that looks like in a practical way in him and through him. And everything else, it either falls into place or it falls behind me, but it gives perspective on who he is and where I am in this world that he's created for me and for us.
Story short, after that, I was like, okay, I'm going to start looking for an apartment. My husband then decided he wanted to work on the marriage. He wanted to go for counseling and all that stuff. But in my mind, I'm like, no, this is it. Like, you know, and I looked up the scriptures, and in Matthew, when the Lord talks about adultery, I looked up that as I'm like, okay, like, you know, this is my green ticket. I'm not doing anything that is not of the Lord. Like the Lord said, if you commit adultery, those are the grounds for divorce. So I was already thinking divorce. I was already thinking separation. Eventually it's going to be divorce, because this is the ultimate sin that he has committed against me, against our marriage, that you cannot reverse. But then the Lord reminded me, how many sins have you done? And were you able to reverse them? And I was like, God, why are you? And it was to a point that I was like, God, why do you keep, like, you know, telling me what I did? And like, you know, why do you have to constantly say that to me? And he said, I'm not reminding you of your wrong. I'm reminding you how big my forgiveness is. There's no tap on that, because my grace is sufficient. So if I'm forgiving someone, you ought to do the same as I'm doing.
I think that there's a lot of shame in going back to God. And God brings up these things where it's like, well, why don't you let people in? You need to let me in through relationship. And when I started allowing God to like shine or to pour love in those areas of like anger and sadness and anxiety and all of these things, I started realizing that the reason why I didn't allow people in was because I had shame. And what people would see in my insufficiency and who I was as a person.
And we start to wear the shame as our identity. So like, you know, it's one thing for me to say, hey, I just went through a breakup, like that hurts, like I'm dealing with some feelings of rejection right now. It's another thing for me to say, that means I'm unlovable.
Yes.
And the moment I go there, if I ever go to the place of wearing my shame as an identity, I'm unlovable, man, that's when you get depressed. That's when like anxiousness and depression and like crazy, terrible choices set in.
Absolutely.
So to identify, like, when are we letting Satan take something we've done or something that's been done to us or a choice we've made and turn it into our identity, when the reality is it has nothing to do with our identity at all. It's I've used this analogy in speaking before. It's like wearing rags and carrying a wedding dress in a suitcase, when the reality is, like, put on the wedding dress and all the rags go in the suitcase. Because that's who we are in Christ. And we take our suitcase of, like, okay, breakups, bad decisions, like all the things that, just attack my soul and my mind and my spirit and my freedom every day. These are in the suitcase. I set those down at the altar every day, but I rise up as the bride of Christ, and I own that.
I actually live in Psalms, and here's why I live in Psalms, because it's such a good example of how we are to relate to God. Another thing I discovered with women is that they don't have the courage to be vulnerable with God or other people. We like to pretend, and that's just such an unhealthy thing. So in that season when Bob was really sick with the MS, I literally lived in Psalms and learned that I could just pour out my heart to God like David did. He was so honest and so raw, and he poured it out. But then the beautiful thing is, always at the end of every psalm, you hear David say, "But you, God," and then he goes on to recount God's attributes. And so it's a beautiful template or a way for us to relate to God. It says, I can be honest with you, God. I can pour it all out, my pain, my hurts, but I'm still going to remember who you are. I'm not going to wallow in it. I'm not going to get stuck in it. I'm going to focus on what you're going to do and who you are.
I just kind of want to round this out, that's the work then on us, is to then start seeking it out. What is it? Like, what are those things? What are those things that we need to be released from, that maybe we're hiding from ourselves or hiding from God? And then to start to ask, like, what did I make up about all of this? Because that is the only way that the enemy can even attack us, is in our mind. So that's where all the damage goes. And so it's to be ruthless in really going after what it is that we have made up about it, so that we can start to ask God to replace it. Like, what is your truth?
And he speaks to us in so many different ways. Like, it can be the Bible. I don't know if you guys have read Joyce Meyer's How to Hear from God, but she talks about all the different ways, through nature, through other people, through you know, the written word. And as long as we're not so strict on the, you know, day-to-day, or like
boxing God up,
boxing him in, he doesn't want to be boxing. He just wants you to go for a walk, and then he'll start downloading things in you. Like, that's how he speaks to us. He speaks to us through people that we're having conversations with. It could be the person at Target. Like, you have no idea when he's going to show up, but it's you being receptive and open to it, and listening to what comes to you. And that.
Welcome back, lovelies. I hope you enjoyed those clips, and that they really support you and empower you and give you some peace of mind, and knowing that there's a whole community of women out there, and that are here to guide you and help you, and know that you are not alone, whatever it is that you're dealing with. I want to close out this episode by really just sharing my gratitude for being on this journey with me, for supporting, for, you know, sharing what this work has meant to you. And I especially want to give thanks to the 3 women who were there at the very beginning, Lucero and Chanel and Shayla. They're the 3 women who were in the first few episodes with me. And they will forever hold a special place in my heart, because whatever God is going to be doing with this show, it all started with them. It is such a reminder for us as a community of women that we need to open ourselves up to the support of each other, because it is with each other that we're going to be able to make things happen on much larger scales. And I thank you for every single one of you women who have been on this show, to open your heart, to give so much of yourself to the viewers, and knowing that it's going to touch people in ways that you'll never know and have no idea and maybe never get credit for it. But just for the sake of even knowing that that one person on the other end needed to hear what you said makes it all worth it. This is why we do what we do. And so I thank you. And until we meet and see each other again,